I never thought silence could be so loud. That first morning in their home, I stood in the kitchen doorway and felt like a stranger. The tiles were cold under my feet. The counters gleamed under the morning light. Everything smelled new, clean, unfamiliar. My son had insisted I move in with them. He said it with such love in his eyes. "Mom," he said, "you've been alone long enough. Come live with us. Let me take care of you now." How could I say no to that? But standing there that morning, watching my daughter-in-law move through her kitchen with the confidence of ownership, I felt small, old, out of place. She smiled at me, a polite smile, the kind you give a guest you're not sure you want. "Good morning," she said. "Did you sleep well?" I nodded. "Yes, thank you." She gestured toward the table. "Sit down. I'll make breakfast." I sat. I watched her crack eggs into a bowl. Her movements were efficient, practiced. She didn't look at me again. My son came in a few minutes later, his tie loose around his neck. He kissed his wife on the cheek and then came to me. He kissed my forehead. "Mom," he said, smiling wide. "Isn't this great? All of us together finally." I smiled back. "Yes, Beta. It's wonderful." But inside, something felt off. Something I couldn't name yet. After breakfast, my daughter-in-law cleared the plates. I stood to help, but she waved me away. No, you rest. You must be tired from the move." I wasn't tired. I was 70, not 90. But I didn't argue. I sat back down. My son left for work. The door clicked shut behind him. The house fell quiet. My daughter-in-law came back into the kitchen. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "So do you cook?" I hesitated, just for a second. But in that second, something inside me shifted. I thought of all the years I'd spent in my own kitchen. The meals I'd made with nothing but flour and hope. The way I'd stretched every rupee to feed my son after his father died. The recipes I'd learned from my mother and her mother before her. But I also thought of the stories I'd heard. Stories from other women my age. Women who moved in with their sons and daughters-in-law. Women who were slowly pushed aside, made to feel useless, unwanted. I looked into my daughter-in-law's eyes and I made a choice. "Not really," I said softly. "I mean, I can make simple things. Rice, dal, but nothing fancy. I never learned all those modern dishes." Her expression didn't change. She just nodded. "Oh," she said. "Okay." And that was it. That was the moment I decided to lie. Not out of malice, not out of spite, but out of fear. I wanted to know who she really was. I wanted to see if she would treat me with kindness, even if I had nothing to offer. Even if I was just an old woman who couldn't cook. I wanted to know if love and respect were conditional in this house. So I became helpless. I pretended I didn't know how to chop onions properly. I asked her how much salt to add to tea. I burned toast. I overcooked rice. I played the role of a woman who had somehow survived 70 years without learning to feed herself. And I watched. I watched her face when I asked questions. I watched the way her smile tightened. I watched the way she sighed when she thought I wasn't looking. At first, she was patient. She showed me how to use the gas stove, even though I'd been using one for 50 years. She explained how to boil milk without letting it overflow. But slowly, I saw the cracks. I used to love cooking. When my husband was alive, our kitchen was the heart of our home. It was small. The walls were stained with smoke and turmeric. The shelves were crowded with old jars and mismatched containers. But it was mine. Every morning, I would wake before the sun and start the day with chai. I'd grind the spices by hand. Cardamom, ginger, cloves. The smell would fill the house and wake my husband and my son with warmth. I made parathas stuffed with potatoes and radishes. I made puris that puffed up golden and crisp. I made samosas for festivals and kheer for celebrations. Food was my language. It was how I said I love you. It was how I said I'm here. It was how I said you matter. After my husband died, cooking became something else. It became survival. There were days when there was no money. Days when I had to choose between buying milk or vegetables. Days when I made one meal stretch across two. But I never let my son see me struggle. I never let him go to bed hungry. I taught myself to make miracles out of nothing. A handful of rice, a pinch of spices, a prayer, and my son grew up strong. He studied hard. He got a good job. He made something of himself. I was so proud. When he told me he was getting married, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I knew my role was changing. I wouldn't be the only woman in his life anymore. And that was okay. That was natural. That was how life moved forward. I met her before the wedding. She was beautiful, educated, confident. She spoke English fluently and carried herself with grace. My son looked at her like she was the sun. I smiled and welcomed her. I gave her my blessings. I told her I was happy. And I was. But I also wondered, would she see me as a mother? Or as a burden? Would she love me because I was part of him? Or would she tolerate me because she had to? These were the questions I carried with me when I moved into their home. These were the questions I hid behind my lie. The first week passed quietly. I stayed out of the way. I sat in the living room and read old magazines. I watered the plants on the balcony. I smiled when spoken to and stayed silent when not. My daughter-in-law cooked every meal. She was good at it. The food was tasty, well-seasoned, nicely presented, but there was no love in it. I don't mean it tasted bad. I mean it felt mechanical, like she was checking off a task. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, done. My son didn't notice. He ate with enthusiasm and complimented her every time. "This is delicious," he'd say. "You're such a good cook." She'd smile. "Thank you." And I'd sit there, chewing slowly, feeling invisible. One evening, she asked me to help her in the kitchen. "Can you cut these onions for me?" I nodded. Of course. I picked up the knife. I held it awkwardly. I made the cuts uneven and slow. She watched me for a moment. Then she took the knife from my hands. "It's okay," she said. "I'll do it. You can just sit." I sat. She didn't say it meanly, but there was something in her tone, something that made me feel useless. I wanted to tell her I'd cut 1,000 onions in my life. I wanted to show her how fast I could julienne a carrot or dice a tomato with my eyes closed. But I didn't. I just sat there and watched her work. That night, I lay in bed and thought about my old kitchen. I thought about the smell of mustard seeds crackling in hot oil. I thought about the sound of dough slapping between my palms as I shaped rotis. I missed it, but I also knew this test was necessary. I needed to see the truth. By the second week, the patience was gone. My daughter-in-law's smiles became thinner. Her answers became shorter. One afternoon, I asked her how to make dal. She stared at me. "You don't know how to make dal?" I shook my head. "I've only made it a few times. I always forget the steps." She exhaled slowly. "Fine, I'll show you." She walked me through it like I was a child. Wash the lentils. Add water, turmeric, salt. Boil. I nodded along. "Thank you, Beta." She didn't respond. The next day I asked her again. She snapped. "I already told you yesterday. How can you forget already?" "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I'm old. My memory isn't what it used to be." She turned away, muttered something under her breath. I didn't catch the words, but I felt them. When my son came home that evening, she was all smiles again. "How was your day, darling?" He hugged her. "Tired, but good. What's for dinner?" "I made your favorite. Chicken curry." He grinned. "You're the best." I sat at the table and said nothing. Later that night, I heard them talking in their room. The walls were thin. "Your mom is sweet," she said. "But honestly, she doesn't know anything. I have to teach her everything." My son laughed. "She's just not used to modern kitchens. Be patient with her." I am being patient, but it's exhausting. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of her words settle on my chest. Exhausting. That's what I was to her. The third week was when things got ugly. We had guests coming over. My son's colleagues. My daughter-in-law wanted to impress them. She spent the whole day cooking. She made biryani, kebabs, raita, dessert. I offered to help. She looked at me like I'd suggested setting the house on fire. "No," she said firmly. "I'll handle it. You just stay out of the way." So I did. I sat in the corner of the living room and watched her rush back and forth. She looked stressed, tired, but determined. The guests arrived. They were polite, well-dressed. They complimented the house, the decor, the food. My daughter-in-law glowed under the praise. Everything was going well. Until someone asked, "Did you make all this yourself?" She hesitated, glanced at me, then smiled. "Yes, all by myself." My son looked proud. "My mom's here too, but she doesn't really cook. So it's all her." One of the guests turned to me. "Oh, you don't cook?" I shook my head. "Not much. I'm not very good at it." The guest laughed politely. "Well, lucky for you. Your daughter-in-law is talented." Everyone laughed. My daughter-in-law blushed. My son beamed. And I sat there, smiling, feeling humiliated. After the guests left, my daughter-in-law was in high spirits. She poured herself a glass of wine and leaned against the counter. "That went well," she said to my son. "You were amazing," he said. She glanced at me, then back at him. "You know, it would be nice if I didn't have to do everything alone. But I guess that's just how it is." My son looked uncomfortable. "Mom tries her best." She shrugged. "I'm sure she does." The words hung in the air like smoke. I excused myself and went to my room. I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time since I'd moved in, I cried. Not because of the words, but because I knew now. I knew that in her eyes, I was nothing more than dead weight. The fourth week was the breaking point. It was a Sunday. My son was home. My daughter-in-law decided to make a special lunch. She asked me to help, not because she wanted my help, but because my son was watching. "Can you stir this while I chop the vegetables?" I nodded. I stood at the stove and stirred the pot. The curry bubbled gently. The steam rose into my face. My son was sitting at the dining table, working on his laptop. "Everything smells great," he called out. My daughter-in-law smiled. "Thanks, love." Then she turned to me. "Make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom." "I will." But I wasn't stirring it right. Or maybe I was. I don't know. I was so focused on playing my part that I didn't notice the flame was too high. The curry started to burn. My daughter-in-law smelled it first. Her head snapped toward the stove. "What are you doing?" She rushed over, grabbed the spoon from my hand, looked into the pot. Her face changed. It went from concern to anger in a single breath. "You burned it. You completely burned it." "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I didn't realize." "How could you not realize? I asked you to do one simple thing." My son looked up. "What happened?" She turned to him, holding up the pot. "She burned the curry. The whole thing is ruined." "Mom," my son said, standing up. "How did that happen?" "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I thought I was stirring it." My daughter-in-law slammed the pot down on the counter. "This is unbelievable. I spent 2 hours making this, and now it's garbage." She wasn't yelling, but her voice was sharp. Cold. My son looked between us. "It's okay. We can order something." "That's not the point," she snapped. "The point is I can't trust her to do anything. Every time I ask her to help, she messes it up." I felt my throat tighten. "I'm sorry, Beta. I'll be more careful next time." She laughed. A bitter, humorless laugh. "There won't be a next time. Just stay out of the kitchen." My son looked uncomfortable. "Come on, that's a bit harsh." She turned to him. "Is it? Your mother has been here for a month and she hasn't learned a single thing. I've tried to be patient. I've tried to teach her, but she's either incapable or she just doesn't care." "That's not fair," my son said quietly. "Isn't it?" She walked out of the kitchen, left me standing there with my head down and my hands trembling. My son touched my shoulder. "It's okay, Mom. Don't worry about it." But it wasn't okay, because I saw it now. I saw exactly who she was, and I realized my test had gone too far. Or maybe it had gone exactly far enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and replayed every moment, every sharp word, every cold glance, every smile that disappeared the moment my son left the room. I thought about my own mother-in-law. She had been strict, traditional, sometimes harsh, but she never made me feel worthless. She never humiliated me in front of others. She never treated me like I was a burden she wished she could discard. I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake, if pretending to be helpless had only invited cruelty instead of revealing it. But then I thought about the women I'd known, the ones who were talented, educated, strong, and still treated like servants in their own sons' homes. because the cruelty wasn't about what you could or couldn't do. It was about power, control, ego, and my daughter-in-law had shown me hers. The question now was what to do about it. I could pack my bags, leave quietly, go back to my old house and live alone again. Or I could stay and teach her a lesson she'd never forget. I thought about it for a long time, and then I made my choice. The next morning, I woke up early, before the sun, before anyone else. I went into the kitchen, the same kitchen I'd been pretending to be useless in for a month, and I started to cook. Not a simple meal, not dal and rice. No, I made the kind of food that takes skill, patience, love. I made aloo parathas from scratch. I kneaded the dough until it was soft and smooth. I stuffed the filling with perfectly spiced potatoes. I rolled them out thin and even and cooked them on the griddle until they were golden and crisp. I made halwa, the kind that requires constant stirring and perfect timing, the kind that smells like ghee and cardamom in childhood. I made fresh chutney, ground it by hand in the mortar and pestle, added green chilies and coriander and a hint of lemon. I made chai, the real kind, boiled with loose leaves and crushed ginger and just the right amount of sugar. By the time the sun came up, the kitchen smelled like a memory. I set the table, arranged everything neatly, poured the chai into cups, and then I waited. My daughter-in-law came out first. She stopped when she smelled the food. She walked into the kitchen, looked at the table, looked at me. "Did you make this?" I nodded. She stared. Her face was unreadable. My son came out a few minutes later. His eyes went wide. "Mom, did you do all this?" I smiled. "Yes, Beta. I wanted to surprise you." He sat down immediately, started serving himself. "This looks amazing. I didn't know you could cook like this." My daughter-in-law sat down slowly. She didn't say anything, just watched. My son took a bite of the paratha. His eyes closed. "Oh my God, Mom. This is incredible. This tastes exactly like the parathas you used to make when I was a kid." He looked at his wife. "You have to try this." She picked up a piece, put it in her mouth, chewed slowly. I watched her face, watched the realization dawn. She looked at me, and I looked back. We both knew. The game was over. After breakfast, my son left for work. He hugged me tight before he went. "Mom, that was the best breakfast I've had in years. Please make that again." "I will, Beta." He kissed his wife goodbye, and then he was gone. The house fell silent. My daughter-in-law stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, staring at me. "You've been lying this whole time." I didn't answer right away. I just started clearing the plates. "Haven't you?" She pressed. I turned to face her. Yes. Her mouth fell open. "Why?" I took a breath. "Because I wanted to see who you really are." She laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "Are you serious? You pretended to be helpless just to test me?" I met her eyes. "Yes." She shook her head. "That's manipulative. That's cruel. Is it?" I asked softly. "Is it more cruel than the way you've treated me for the past month?" Her face flushed. "I didn't treat you badly. You dismissed me. You mocked me. You made me feel worthless." "I was frustrated," she said defensively. "You weren't helping. You were just in the way. Because I pretended not to know how to cook? That made me worthless?" She didn't answer. I stepped closer. I raised my son alone. I cooked every meal he ever ate. I stretched every rupee to keep him fed and clothed and educated. I made miracles out of nothing. My voice was steady, calm, but firm. And you treated me like I was garbage because I couldn't chop an onion the way you wanted. She looked away. I didn't come here to be a burden. I came here because my son asked me to. Because he loves me. And I thought maybe you would too. I paused. But love isn't something you give only when it's convenient. Love isn't something you show only when someone is watching. She still didn't look at me. "I wanted to see if you would treat me with kindness, even if I had nothing to offer. Even if I was just an old woman who couldn't cook." I let the words settle. "And you failed." Her eyes filled with tears. But I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. "You humiliated me in front of guests. You made me feel small. You spoke about me like I was a burden you couldn't wait to get rid of." She wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry. Are you?" She looked at me then. really looked at me. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know. At least that was honest. For the next few days, the house was tense. My daughter-in-law avoided me. She cooked her own meals. She didn't ask for help. She barely spoke. My son noticed. He asked me if something was wrong. I told him everything was fine. But he asked her too, and she told him the same thing. We were both lying. One evening, I was sitting on the balcony, watching the sun set. She came out, stood beside me, didn't say anything for a while. Then, quietly, she spoke. I was jealous of you. I looked at her. She kept her eyes on the horizon. When we got married, he used to talk about you all the time. How strong you were. How you sacrificed everything for him. How much he loved you. She paused, and I felt like I could never measure up. Like no matter what I did, I'd always be second to you. I stayed silent. So when you moved in, I think part of me wanted to prove I didn't need you, that I was enough on my own. Her voice cracked, but instead, I just became cruel. And I hate that. She finally looked at me, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I took a breath. I'm not your competition, I said gently. I never was. She nodded. I know. I know that now. I reached out, took her hand. You don't have to be me. You just have to be you. And that's enough. She cried harder then, and I let her, because sometimes that's all someone needs, permission to break. That night, my son came home to find us cooking together. He stood in the doorway, mouth open, eyes wide. What's happening? My daughter-in-law smiled. Your mom is teaching me how to make your favorite parathas. He looked at me. I smiled. Come, Beta. Sit. Watch. Learn. He laughed, pulled up a chair, and for the first time since I'd moved in, the kitchen felt warm. Over the next few weeks, things changed. Not overnight, not perfectly, but slowly. My daughter-in-law started asking me questions, real questions, about my life, my past, my recipes. I told her stories about my mother, my grandmother, the women who came before me. She listened, and little by little I taught her, not just how to cook, but why. Why certain spices go together, why you need dough a certain way, why you never rush a good curry. She started to understand that cooking wasn't just about food. It was about love, memory, connection. One day, she made dal on her own, without asking for help. She brought me a bowl, nervous, hopeful. I tasted it. It was perfect. I smiled. You did it. She grinned, a real, genuine grin. And in that moment, I saw her, not as the woman who had hurt me, but as the woman she could become. Months passed. The house became lighter. Laughter returned. Meals were shared. Stories were told. My daughter-in-law and I weren't just coexisting anymore. We were building something. Not a perfect relationship, but a real one. One day, she said to me, I'm glad you lied. I raised an eyebrow. She smiled. If you hadn't, I never would have seen myself clearly. I never would have changed. I nodded. And I never would have known if you were capable of change. She laughed. So we both won. I suppose we did. My son watched us from across the room. He looked so happy, so relieved. And I realized that was all I'd ever wanted. Not to be right, not to win, just to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. And now I was. There are nights now when the three of us sit around the table after dinner. The dishes are done. The lights are dim. The house is quiet. And we just talk. About everything. About nothing. My daughter-in-law tells me about her childhood, her fears, her dreams. I tell her about mine. My son sits between us, holding both our hands. And I think about how close we came to losing this. How easily pride and fear and silence can destroy a family. But also how powerful honesty and humility and forgiveness can be. I don't regret the test. It hurt. It was hard. It revealed ugly truths. But it also revealed something beautiful. That people can change. That love can grow. That respect can be earned. Not through pretending. Not through performing. But through truth. One evening, my daughter-in-law and I were cooking together. She was chopping vegetables. I was stirring a pot. She looked at me, hesitated, then asked, "Do you forgive me?" I stopped stirring, looked at her. I thought about all the pain, all the words, all the moments I'd felt small. And then I thought about all the laughter, all the stories, all the meals we'd shared since. I smiled. "Yes, Beta, I do." She exhaled, a long, shaky breath. "Thank you." I reached over, squeezed her hand. "But more importantly, I hope you forgive yourself." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm trying. That's all we can do." Now, when I stand in the kitchen, I don't feel like a stranger anymore. I feel at home, not because it's my kitchen, but because it's ours. My daughter-in-law and I cook side by side. We laugh. We argue about spices. We taste each other's dishes and offer feedback. Sometimes my son joins us. He's a terrible cook, but he tries, and we love him for it. The food we make now tastes different. It tastes like forgiveness, like growth, like family. And every time we sit down to eat, I say a silent prayer, not for perfection, but for this, for second chances, for open hearts, for the courage to be honest even when it's hard. Because in the end, that's what saved us. Not my cooking, not my test, but our willingness to see each other, really see each other, and choose love anyway. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that first morning, the cold tiles under my feet, the unfamiliar kitchen, the polite smile that didn't reach her eyes, and I think about how far we've come. It wasn't easy. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't without pain. But it was worth it. Because now, when my daughter-in-law looks at me, I don't see tolerance. I see respect. I see love. I see family. And when I look at her, I don't see the woman who hurt me. I see the woman who grew, who learned, who became better. That's the power of truth. It breaks you open, but it also lets the light in. One Sunday morning, we had guests over again. Different people, but the same nervousness from my daughter-in-law. She was cooking. I offered to help. She smiled. "Please." We worked together, side by side, moving in rhythm. No words needed. The guests arrived. The table was full. The food was beautiful. Someone asked who made all this. My daughter-in-law glanced at me, smiled. We both did. The guests looked impressed. What a team. My son beamed. They really are. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not in myself, but in us, in what we'd built, in what we'd survived, in what we'd become. I don't know how many years I have left. I'm old. My hands shake sometimes. My memory isn't perfect, but I'm happy. Not because my life is easy, but because it's full. Full of love, full of laughter, full of family. My daughter-in-law is teaching her nieces how to cook now. She brings them over on weekends, and we all crowd into the kitchen. She tells them stories, my stories, about resilience, about sacrifice, about never giving up. And I watch her, this woman who once made me feel so small. Now she's passing on the lessons I taught her. And I realize that's the truest form of respect. Not just saying sorry, but becoming better. There's a moment that stands out to me. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind where the world feels soft and slow. My daughter-in-law and I were sitting on the balcony, drinking chai, watching the rain. She turned to me, her face serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think I'm a good person?" I looked at her, really looked at her. "I think you're a human person, which means you're capable of both good and bad." She nodded slowly. "But," I continued, "I also think you're brave, because you faced your worst self, and you chose to change." She smiled, a small, grateful smile. "Thank you." We sat in silence for a while. The rain drummed gently on the roof. Then she said, "I hope I can be half the woman you are someday." I laughed. Soft, warm. "You don't have to be me, Beta. Just be the best version of yourself." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there. Two women, two generations, two hearts learning to beat in sync. The kitchen is my favorite place now, not because of the food, but because of what it represents. It's where I tested her, where I revealed the truth, where we broke, where we healed, It's where we became family. Every time I stand at the stove, I think about my mother, my grandmother, all the women who taught me that food is more than sustenance. It's memory, it's love, it's legacy. And now I'm passing that on, not just to my daughter-in-law, but to the next generation and the one after that. Because that's how we survive. That's how we grow. We teach, we learn, we forgive, we love, and we cook. We cook meals that nourish the body. But more importantly, we cook meals that nourish the soul. If I could go back to that first morning, I don't think I'd change anything. The lie was necessary. The pain was necessary. The truth was necessary. Because without it, we'd still be strangers living under the same roof. Polite, distant, cold. But now we're family. Messy, imperfect, real. And that's worth everything. My son asked me recently if I was happy. We were sitting in the living room. Just the two of us. I looked at him. This man I'd raised. This man I'd sacrificed everything for. Yes, Beta. I'm very happy. He smiled. Good. You deserve it. I reached over, touched his face. So do you? He took my hand, held it tight. Thank you, Mom, for everything. I didn't say anything, just squeezed his hand, because some things don't need words. There are still hard days, days when old wounds ache, days when words are said that sting, days when patience runs thin. But we work through them. We talk, we listen, we apologize, we forgive, and we keep going, because that's what family does. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. I'm writing this now because I want to remember. I want to remember the cold tiles under my feet that first morning. I want to remember the lie I told and why I told it. I want to remember the pain, the betrayal, the breaking point. But most of all, I want to remember the healing. The slow, steady, beautiful healing. Because that's the part that matters most. Not the fall, but the rise. Not the hurt, but the forgiveness. Not the silence, but the voice. They say blood is thicker than water, but I think love is thicker than both. Love that's tested, love that's chosen, love that's earned. That's the kind of love that lasts. That's the kind of love we have now. And I'm grateful. So deeply, endlessly grateful. One last thing. If you're reading this or hearing this and you're in a situation like I was, I want you to know something. You are not a burden. You are not too old. You are not useless. You are not invisible. You are valuable. You are worthy. You are enough. And if the people around you can't see that, it's not because you're lacking. It's because they are. But here's the thing. People can change. Not everyone. Not always. But sometimes. And if they're willing, if they're open, if they're brave, they can grow. Just like my daughter-in-law did. Just like I did. So don't give up. Don't stay silent. Don't accept cruelty as your fate. Speak your truth. Set your boundaries. Demand respect. And if they can't give it, walk away. Because you deserve better. You deserve love. You deserve kindness. You deserve family. Real family. The kind that sees you, values you, honors you. I'm old now, but I'm not invisible. I'm not silent. I'm not small. I'm a woman who survived, who loved, who fought, who forgave. I'm a woman who pretended to be weak to reveal the truth. And I'm a woman who, in the end, found exactly what she was looking for. Not perfection, but connection. Not control, but respect. Not performance, but love. Real, messy, imperfect love. And that's more than enough. The kitchen is warm tonight. The food is ready. The table is set. My son is laughing. My daughter-in-law is smiling. And I'm here, present, seen, loved. This is what I fought for. This is what I lied for. This is what I waited for. And it was worth every moment. So if you ask me now, would I do it again? Would I pretend to be helpless? Would I endure the pain? Would I test her? Yes, 1,000 times yes, because it gave me the truth. And the truth set us free. This is my story. The story of a mother who pretended to be weak to find out who was strong. The story of a daughter-in-law who faced her worst self and chose to grow. The story of a family that broke and healed and became whole again. Not perfect, but real. And that's all that matters.